I don't really mind Clayton being homosexual. I just don't like him dating men.
You really haven't grasped the concept of this gay thing yet, have you?
There must be homosexuals who date women.
Yeah, they're called lesbians.
In 1988, the Golden Girls filmed a scene so controversial, NBC executives panicked. It involved mud masks, a black family, and 13 minutes that would haunt television for decades. Betty White delivered one line that seemed innocent at the time. But 32 years later, streaming services pulled the entire episode. They erased it completely. What started as comedy became a national scandal. Even black writers defended it. But the damage was done. Here's what really happened. In August 1984, NBC held a fall preview special at their studios in Burbank. The idea was to showcase their upcoming shows. But something unexpected happened. Two actresses, Selma Diamond from Night Court and Doris Roberts from Remington Steele, got up to promote the new crime drama Miami Vice. Selma misheard the title as Miami Nice, and instead of correcting her, the two ran with it. They turned the mix-up into a comedy sketch about older women in Miami, dancing, flaunting mink coats, and relaxing on the beach. The crowd laughed, but one man in the room wasn't just laughing, he was thinking. Warren Littlefield, a senior VP at NBC, saw something more. He later remembered that these middle-aged women lit up the stage. Their comic timing, their presence, it hit hard. He called it one of the luckiest accidents in television history. That joke planted a seed that would grow into the Golden Girls. But there was another spark. NBC President Brandon Tartikoff had always loved the 1953 film How to Marry a Millionaire. It starred Marilyn Monroe, Betty Grable, and Lauren Bacall, three glamorous women on the hunt for rich husbands in New York. Tartikoff wondered, could something like that work for television? At first, the idea didn't land. The premise of women chasing love felt out of touch with the 1980s feminist movement. But then, Tartikoff visited his aunt. That visit changed everything. He realized the show didn't need to be about young women. It could be about older women living together, just like his aunt and her friends. Still, even Tartikoff's colleagues weren't all looped in. Warren Littlefield later said he wasn't sure how serious that Monroe connection really was. Maybe Tartikoff kept it to himself. Either way, the Monroe-inspired concept met that Miami Nice comedy spark, and things started to take shape. That's when producers Paul Junger-Witt and Tony Thomas brought the idea to writer Susan Harris. At first, Harris didn't want to come back to TV. She'd made Soap and Benson, and she was semi-retired. But when her husband Paul mentioned the idea of older women living in Miami, she didn't hesitate. Of course, yes, she said. But there was a disagreement from the start. NBC wanted women in their 40s. Harris imagined women in their 70s. For Harris, older meant stories, life experience, real humor, not punchlines. She said she wanted to write about people who had stories to tell. It was a bold idea. No one on TV was focusing on that age group, but Harris saw it clearly. When she turned in her script, Littlefield read it and gave it an immediate green light, even though the women were 20 years older than NBC had requested. When the pilot was filmed on April 17, 1985, the cast looked a little different. There wasn't just Sophia, Blanche, Rose, and Dorothy. There was Coco. Played by Charles Levin, Coco was a gay houseboy who cooked and lived with the women. The network had actually suggested him. This was just 4 years after NBC had caught backlash for a gay character in Love, Sidney. But this time, they wanted Coco to be open and confident, not closeted. Coco was originally meant to be a core character, and Levin had played gay roles before. But when the pilot ran long, his scenes were the first to go. At the same time, Estelle Getty's character, Sophia, was only meant to appear occasionally, but she tested so well with audiences that producers made her a regular. Coco was cut, and Sophia took his place. That small edit changed TV forever. There's something else wild. Estelle Getty, who played the 79-year-old Sophia, was actually younger than Bea Arthur, who played her daughter Dorothy. Getty was born in July 1923. Arthur was born in May 1922. Getty was 62. Arthur was 63. But with heavy makeup, thick glasses, and a white wig, Getty was aged up by 17 years every day. It took over an hour to transform her. She was the first of the main four cast, thanks to her performance in Torch Song Trilogy. And even Disney's Michael Eisner admitted she was the spark that turned 3 women into girls. When the show ended in 1992, Getty was 68, Arthur was 69. Their roles stayed flipped the whole way through. Betty White almost wasn't Rose. She came in to audition for Blanche. That made sense. She had just finished playing the man-hungry Sue Ann Nivens on the Mary Tyler Moore Show. But director Jay Sandrich thought it was too similar. He said if she played another neighborhood nymphomaniac, people would just think it was Sue Ann all over again. So he told her to read for Rose. White wasn't happy. She said she felt heartsick. She didn't understand the character. But Rue McClanahan wasn't clicking as Rose either. Then they switched. McClanahan read as Blanche and nailed it. Suddenly, it all worked. Rose was literal and sweet. If you said, "I could eat a horse," she'd call Animal Rescue. White later said McClanahan took Blanche out into orbit, further than she ever could have gone. But there was one more casting twist that could have rewritten history. Broadway star Elaine Stritch auditioned for Dorothy. From the start, she felt that Susan Harris didn't like her. Stritch asked if she could mess with the dialogue a bit. Harris told her she could change just the punctuation. Stritch didn't listen. She threw in an F-bomb as a joke. "Ying! Don't forget the fucking hors d'oeuvres." Some execs laughed. Harris didn't. Stritch later joked that she blew her shot at $35,000, or maybe $50,000 per episode. And this was a show that would rake in millions in syndication. Producers said they had always wanted B. Arthur anyway. Stritch never even got through the script. McClanahan also had to fight for her role, just not to get it, but to do it her way. In the script, Blanche was clearly Southern, more Southern than Blanche Dubois. But when she tried the accent during the pilot, director Jay Sandrich stopped her. He said, "I don't want to hear a Southern accent." He made her use her regular Oklahoma voice. When the show was picked up, a new director came in. McClanahan asked producers for a compromise. Instead of a true Southern drawl, she created something theatrical, like Mae West, with a twist of Georgia charm. It was inspired by her mother's cousin, Anna Pearl, who once tried to sound classy by mixing English with Southern. McClanahan said Blanche invented this voice herself because she thought it was sexy. Nobody else on Earth talked like that. When The Golden Girls aired for the first time on September 14, 1985, nobody saw it coming. That night, around 21.5 million households tuned in. The show scored a 25 rating and a 43 share. For perspective, that was the best premiere for any network show in 2 years. It even beat The Cosby Show, which was already a massive hit. And just like that, a show starring 4 older women, something Hollywood didn't think could succeed, shot straight to #1 in the Nielsen ratings. The show didn't just break records, it shattered long-standing beliefs. NBC hadn't seen a comedy launch like this since Chico and the Man back in 1974. That was over a decade ago. No one thought a geriatric comedy could even come close to that. But The Golden Girls didn't just match it, it surpassed it. NBC ended up grabbing the top 4 spots in the ratings that week. In fact, it dominated 11 out of the top 15 shows. That week also marked NBC's 16th win in 17 weeks. Suddenly, the network was unstoppable. Behind the scenes, NBC was nervous. Really nervous. The show was scheduled for Saturday night, which TV insiders called the death slot. Most people, especially the 18 to 49 crowd, the audience advertisers cared most about, weren't even home. Saturday nights were usually reserved for reruns or cheap filler content. Executives thought this was where shows went to die, and they were about to launch something totally unconventional. 4 older women living together, cracking jokes, and tackling real-life issues. Nobody thought that would work, but it worked in a way that changed television forever. The Golden Girls didn't just survive Saturday nights, it owned them. It became the cornerstone of NBC's weekend lineup. It proved that smart, well-written shows could bring in huge audiences no matter when they aired. Even today, networks avoid Saturday night premieres. Yet this one show flipped the script and made TV history. Then came the awards, and not just a few. Over its 7 seasons, the Golden Girls earned 68 Emmy nominations and won 11. But what really stood out was something incredibly rare. All 4 lead actresses won Emmys. That only happened 3 other times in history, with All in the Family, Will and Grace, and Schitt's Creek. But the Golden Girls did it while all 4 stars competed in the same category. Betty White won first in 1986. Rue McClanahan followed in 1987. Bea Arthur and Estelle Getty both won in 1988. That kind of clean sweep didn't just happen. It was proof that these women weren't just funny. They were among the best in the business. The Golden Girls was known for its sharp humor and fearless storytelling, but one episode from 1988 sparked a firestorm that no one saw coming. It was Season 3, Episode 23, titled Mixed Blessings. The episode aired on March 19th and seemed like any other until 13.5 minutes in, when Rose and Blanche walked into the kitchen wearing dark brown mud masks. At that moment, Dorothy's son was introducing his fiancée, Lorraine, who was black, along with her family. Lorraine's mother, who wasn't wearing her glasses, mistook Rose and Blanche for Michael's parents. She had assumed he was black. Rose's line came quickly. "This is mud on our faces. We're not really black." She said it in her usual awkward and innocent way. It was meant to be a joke about misunderstanding, not race. At the time, it was seen as a clever twist, playing on social awkwardness, not blackface. But decades later, that one scene would become the center of national controversy. In June 2020, during the peak of the Black Lives Matter movement, Hulu quietly pulled the episode from its platform. There was no warning, no explanation. Just gone. It was part of a wider reaction from Hollywood, what some called the blackface purge. Shows like 30 Rock, Community, The Office, and Scrubs all had episodes removed. But this one felt different. The characters weren't in blackface. It was a mud mask. It was comedy, not mockery. While protesters demanded justice for George Floyd and broader systemic change, streaming services responded by erasing sitcoms. For many viewers, it felt like a stunt, a distraction. The episode had been available for years. Why now? Why this? What Hulu didn't expect was the backlash, and it came fast, loud, and from the very voices they thought they were protecting. Black writers and critics stepped up to defend the episode. Roxane Gay called it weird, counterproductive, and stupid. She said removing the episode made no sense. Imani Gandhi's comment went viral when she said, "Dorothy, Rose, Sophia, and Blanche are the least problematic white women in all of television." And Erica Williams. Simon summed up the mood perfectly. In what world does "Stop Killing Us" sound like "Please remove episodes of Golden Girls"? These women weren't defending outdated jokes. They were pointing out that erasing this content didn't help the real cause. It didn't fix anything. It only made things worse by pretending that a 32-year-old two-year-old comedy was the problem. What makes it even more confusing is that Mixed Blessings was one of the show's most progressive episodes. It told the story of a 23-year-old white man marrying a 44-year-old pregnant black woman. That alone was rare on TV in the late 80s. The episode tackled racism, age differences, and family tensions, and resolved with love, compromise, and support. By the end, the mothers on both sides agreed to support the marriage. For a Reagan-era sitcom, that was revolutionary. The show didn't shy away from sensitive moments. In one scene, Sophia asked if the rumors about black men's sexual prowess were true. It was an uncomfortable moment played during a kitchen conversation over cheesecake. The line aired on national TV without censorship. That's how bold the show was. Then came Blanche. She quickly said, "Yes," confirming the stereotype without hesitation. Then, just as quickly, she tried to backtrack. But the damage was done. That moment exposed something deeper. Even in a progressive show, even among supposedly enlightened characters, some beliefs went unchallenged. The scene became even more complicated when Trudy, one of Lorraine's sisters, responded to Dorothy's attempt to shut down the stereotype. Trudy smiled and said, "Call it whatever you want. I'm just grateful it's true." That single line shocked many. It wasn't just a joke. It reinforced the harmful stereotype. It fed into the old myth that reduced black men to sexual objects. That myth known today as the Mandingoist stereotype, has roots in slavery and dehumanization. Dorothy tried to stop the conversation. She called it out, made it clear that it was wrong. But her words didn't land. The others moved on, laughed, or ignored it. It was a perfect example of how, even with good intentions, people could still fall short. They didn't mean harm, but they didn't fix it either. That scene has since been used as a case study for how television in the 1980s struggled with race, trying to be progressive, but often lacking the depth to truly succeed. Bea Arthur and Betty White made millions laugh on The Golden Girls, but behind the scenes, things weren't so golden. Bea didn't just dislike Betty, she needed her. That's what her son Matthew Sachs once said. He believed his mother picked Betty as her emotional outlet. She unknowingly carried the attitude that it was fun to have somebody to be angry at. And that somebody, for 7 full seasons from 1985 to 1992, was Betty White. Betty knew it too. In a 2011 interview, she admitted Bea was not that fond of me, and even found her cheerful attitude annoying. Betty said, "Sometimes if I was happy, she'd be furious." That clash of personalities created daily tension. Betty's upbeat energy seemed to irritate Bea, who preferred seriousness and focus. It wasn't just personal, it became a method for Bea. Having a nemesis kept her sharp, like she needed that friction to stay locked in. But their conflict wasn't only emotional, it was professional. Bea and Betty had completely different ways of working. Bea came from Broadway. She treated every filming day like a stage performance. She stayed in character between takes and believed actors should stay quiet, focused, and ready. Betty was the opposite. She loved chatting with the audience, keeping the mood light and the laughter real. It helped her energy, and it worked for her. But to Bea, it was chaos. Her son said it drove her absolutely crazy. Bea saw it as unprofessional and distracting. Betty saw it as connecting with fans and keeping things fun. Both were good at what they did, but their methods clashed, and neither wanted to budge. Then came the moment that made everything worse. In 1986, during the first Emmy Awards after The Golden Girls premiered, all 4 stars were nominated for Best Lead Actress in a Comedy Series. But only one won, Betty White. That night changed everything. Bea was furious. She felt insulted. According to Rue McClanahan, Bea called Betty a choice word backstage. Why? Because Bea thought she was the better actress. She had stage credentials, dramatic training, and years of hard work behind her. Betty, she believed, was just a TV personality, a game show regular who got lucky. That Emmy win cut deep. Bea felt overlooked, and even though she won her own Emmy 2 years later, the wound didn't heal. Betty had won first. That mattered. As the seasons went on, Bea grew more frustrated, not just with Betty, but with the show itself. She hated the jokes about Dorothy's looks. While the other women laughed off jokes about their characters, Bea felt attacked. Dorothy's height, deep voice, lack of sex appeal. These jokes hit too close to home. Bea felt they weren't just mocking a character, but mocking her. She thought the writing was getting lazy, focusing too much on physical humor. She saw a pattern, what she called Dorothy bashing, and it wore her down. It wasn't fun anymore. She wasn't proud of the material, and with her feud with Betty still simmering, it all became too much. When Bea left the show after 7 seasons, it was clear the Golden Girls couldn't survive without her. Her dry wit had held the show together. Without it, the group lost its edge. What makes their story so sad is how close they once were. In the early years, they carpooled to work together. Bea wouldn't go to lunch unless Betty joined. They were friendly, even warm. But none of that lasted. They never sat down to work things out. The tension grew, the silence grew longer, and they drifted too far apart. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, American TV took a risk, a bold one. The Golden Girls, known for its humor and heart, stepped into controversial territory when it introduced Clayton Hollingsworth. He was Blanche's brother, and he was gay. But that wasn't all. He wanted to marry his partner, Doug. This wasn't a throwaway plot. It was a 2-part storyline, first in Season 4, then again in Season 6. At the time, same-sex marriage wasn't legal anywhere in the U.S. The idea of a gay wedding on primetime television was shocking, especially in conservative America. At first, Blanche was okay with Clayton being gay, as long as he kept it quiet, but when he said he was going to have a commitment ceremony, she panicked. What would the neighbors say? How would it look? Her fear clashed with her love for her brother. The emotional breakthrough came not from Blanche, but from Sophia. At 80 years old, Sophia said something simple, but unforgettable. Everyone wants someone to grow old with, and shouldn't everyone have that chance? It was honest. It was kind. And it aired years before most people were ready to hear it. But that's what made it matter. Then came February 17th, 1990. That night, The Golden Girls aired 72 hours. The episode started with a letter. Rose found out that a blood transfusion she got 6 years ago might have been contaminated with HIV. She had to get tested and wait 3 full days for the results. At the time, this was only the second sitcom to tackle AIDS, even though the disease had already killed over 120,000 people in the US by then. Worldwide, women made up 40% of HIV cases, but media barely spoke about them. This episode didn't avoid fear. It didn't sugarcoat things, but it also didn't blame. The most powerful moment came from Blanche. She told Rose, AIDS is not a bad person's disease. It is not God punishing people for their sins. That line cut through ignorance and shame. What most viewers didn't know was that behind the scenes, the story was deeply personal. One of the show's editors had a partner dying from AIDS. One of the writers had a mother who faced a similar blood scare. The pain was real, and that's what gave the episode its truth. But The Golden Girls wasn't just about social issues. It also shattered what people thought women over 50 should be like. And Blanche Devereaux led the charge. Across 180 episodes, Blanche had 165 sexual partners. That wasn't just a joke, it was a statement. In the 1980s, older women on TV were supposed to be quiet, modest, and certainly not sexual. Blanche refused all of that. And here's the twist. She was only 52 when the show began. The show talked openly about condoms, safe sex, and desire. In one moment that stood out, the women were embarrassed while buying condoms. Blanche didn't flinch. She said they were being morally and socially responsible. That confidence gave older women something rare: permission. Permission to still feel desire, to still have agency, and to not feel shame about it. At a time when aging was linked to invisibility, the Golden Girls lit a fire. Dorothy Zbornak lit one too, but in a different way. After 38 years of marriage, her husband Stan left her for a flight attendant, and he didn't even tell her in person. A lawyer did it over the phone. That betrayal hit hard, and it wasn't just fiction. It mirrored real women's stories during the 1980s divorce boom. Dorothy didn't just cry and move on. She fought. She re-entered the workforce. She faced age discrimination. She struggled to find steady work. She took jobs as a substitute teacher, a night school instructor, even a children's TV writer. But she never gave up. When she finally found purpose in education, she chose it over money. That decision, passion over pay, showed that women over 50 could still build new careers. She didn't fade into the background. She proved that you could begin again, no matter your age or situation. And the show didn't stop there. It tackled women's health issues long before anyone else dared. In Season 2, Blanche faced menopause. It was awkward, it was emotional, and it was real. This was one of the first times television openly talked about menopause. But the show didn't stop with hot flashes. It showed how menopause affected sex, identity, and relationships. Later, the show explored breast cancer, chronic fatigue syndrome, and more. Dorothy's experience with chronic fatigue was especially powerful. Doctors didn't believe her. They dismissed her. That story echoed what many women were going through at the time. The writers did their research. They spoke with doctors and real women. And they brought those voices into the script. By doing so, the Golden Girls gave visibility to issues that had been kept silent. Things that were seen as too personal, too embarrassing, or too complicated for television. But they weren't too complicated for these women. And by speaking those truths, the show gave others permission to speak theirs. The Golden Girls wasn't supposed to work. A sitcom about 4 women over 50 didn't fit the TV formula. Yet, it not only worked, it became one of the most celebrated shows in television history. In 2013, it ranked number 54 on TV Guide's list of the 60 best series of all time. A year later, the Writers Guild put it at 69 on their list of the 101 best written TV series. That alone was surprising, but the show didn't stop there. It won 11 Primetime Emmy Awards and got nominated 68 times during its 7-year run from 1985 to 1992. Every lead actress, Bea Arthur, Betty White, Rue McClanahan, and Estelle Getty, won an Emmy for her role. Only 2 other sitcoms in history have managed that. The praise didn't fade with time. In 2023, Variety ranked it even higher, number 18, on its list of the 100 greatest TV shows ever. That's a big leap. It means the show's reputation is still growing. Long after it ended, it keeps climbing those lists. Critics still study it, writers still learn from it, and fans, old and new, still love it. That's the thing. It never really left. The Golden Girls is having a second life, thanks to streaming. New fans, including those born long after 1992, are discovering it on platforms like Hulu. According to the Associated Press, people in their 20s are now watching a show about women in their 50s and 60s, and they're loving it. The issues the show tackled, aging, friendship, death, sexuality, loneliness, still hit home. Even the jokes feel fresh. Millennials and Gen Z viewers are laughing and crying with characters old enough to be their grandparents. The show talks about menopause, retirement, and elder care, but it does it with warmth, honesty, and humor. That's why it works. And it's not just an American thing. Audiences around the world are watching too. The show has been adapted in Spain, Russia, and the Philippines. That kind of global reach proves something bigger. The themes in The Golden Girls, love, loss, laughter, loyalty, don't belong to one country or one generation. They're human,